Midweek Pictorial, April 29, 1920. Pioneers in the use of overalls designed to frighten profiteers and reduce the cost of clothing. These men are city officials of Birmingham, Alabama, where the movement started. At first treated as a joke, the new idea is assuming large proportions. The overall movement is not confined wholly to men, as some women also, as shown above, are similarly clad. W.D. Upshaw, representative from Georgia, who recently startled the House by appearing at a session clad in overalls. He made a short speech on the subject and expects that many congressmen will follow his example. Members of the Cheese Club, composed largely of publicity men, parading in overalls on 46th Street, New York City. The members of the club have pledged themselves to persist in the movement. King George of England mixing in a most democratic way with a throng of football enthusiasts after a game at Manchester. The crowd cheered him and sang "He's a jolly good fellow" as he passed through. Joe Stetcher, Wright, and Ed Strangler Lewis shaking hands just before their great wrestling match in the 71st Regiment Armory, New York. The match was one of the best ever contested. It lasted 3 hours, 4 minutes, and 15 seconds before Stetcher took off a headlock and with a body hold and wrist lock pinned Lewis's shoulders to the mat, thus retaining his championship. Motorcycle hill climbing contest at Mine Hill, Dover, New Jersey. It was a 500-foot course with a 50% grade, and was won by cyclist Fritz. Only 2 machines reached top. McKinney of Patterson is here shown hitting a rock and bounding in air. The Lincolnshire is one of the big events of the English turf season. At its running on March 24th, Furious won, with Scatwell and Monteith following in order. The horses are here seen at the finish. The winner was at odds of 33-1. Disorders in Ireland still continue, and not a week passes without being marked by some attack on police barracks or the murder of some member of the constabulary. The British government made a sudden change of front in the matter of the political prisoners who had gone on a hunger strike, and some of whom were very near death. 66 strikers were released on parole, for a period differing in each case according to its particular nature. Lord French stated that some of these had been released by an error, as it was not intended that the act of clemency should be extended to any except those who were awaiting trial. Photo caption: Easter Sunday scene in Glasnevin Cemetery, Dublin, Ireland. Woman putting a Celtic cross with a Gaelic inscription on the grave of Robert Coleman, who died while a prisoner. Sentry removing a barbed wire barricade in an Irish city to allow a car to pass after the occupants had been searched. This occurred in the period of apprehension of Irish outbreaks just prior to Easter Sunday. It had been feared that revolt might break out on that day, as it had 4 years before, when hundreds were killed and the leader executed. There were sporadic attacks on barracks, but no widespread uprising. Cart being searched for arms and hand grenades in one of the streets of Dublin. The British held that this was necessary because of the fact that murders were frequent and that large quantities of arms were finding their way into the hands of the Sinn Féiners. Arrests still continued to be made in large numbers. On April 15th, a raid was carried out that resulted in the arrest of over 100. Only 5 of these were ultimately detained. Armed soldiers guarding the entrance to Dublin Castle on Easter Monday. The entrance was heavily sandbagged, as it was here that the first shot of the Easter Rebellion of 1916 was fired, and it was feared that a similar attempt might be made this year. Nothing of the kind occurred, however, and the day passed in comparative quiet. A comparatively new phase of the Irish Troubles was developed when the Income Tax Collector's office in Dublin was burned in a raid of masked men. Valuable records and papers were destroyed, and in the picture is seen some of the litter that was left after the raiders did their work. Members of the military police searching country travelers in Ireland. The lines have been tightened all over the island, and investigation of anything, however seemingly simple and innocent, that may be conveying arms or seditious literature is carried on with diligence. The cars of the well-to-do in Ireland are subjected to the same searching scrutiny as the carts of the peasantry. Soldiers are here seen lifting the hood of the auto to see if anything contraband is being carried. If so, it would be confiscated, and the occupants of the car would be called upon to explain the case to the authorities. St. George's Episcopal Church in Stuyvesant Square, New York, where a shocking murder was committed on Sunday, April 18th. The church is one of the landmarks of the city and has a large congregation of prominent business and professional men. Dr. James W. Marco, celebrated surgeon, who was shot and almost instantly killed by a maniac while passing the collection plate in St. George's Church. The murderer was pursued and captured. Disastrous cargo boat fire in Brooklyn, as pictured from an airplane. A half hour after the fire had started, an airplane had raced all the way from Keyport, New Jersey, and was snapping photographs of the flames. The sky for miles was blackened by the smoke. Ammonia, nitrates, and other combustibles exploded. Funeral procession of the late ex-president of China, held in Peking, China, February 2nd, 1920. The beer of Feng Kuo Chang is prominent in the left foreground. The crowds were so enormous that the Chinese policemen seen in the picture had hard work to keep order. General John J. Pershing inspecting troops at Fort J, Governor's Island, New York, April 16, 1920. He took luncheon with Lieutenant General Bullard, the department commander, and then inspected members of the 22nd Infantry and Guard companies stationed at the island. He stopped to talk with several soldiers wearing service stripes. 1,200 soldiers of the Polish-American Legion arriving in New York April 18th on the SS Antigone. They have been fighting the Bolsheviks since 1917. The troops were originally recruited from all parts of the United States. French flag flying in the square before the Opera House at Frankfurt. The latter city is the most important of the many on the right bank of the Rhine that have been taken possession of by the French as a protest against the violation of the treaty terms by Germany in sending troops into the Ruhr district. One of the leading terms of the treaty was that a space about 30 miles wide on the right bank of the Rhine should be demilitarized. This provision was violated by the entry of German troops, and the French action followed in consequence. General de Metz, in immediate charge of the French troops at Frankfurt, standing on a balcony commanding a view of one of the principal squares of the city. The occupation of the city was carried out with surprising celerity on April 6th. The troops started a half hour after midnight, and by dawn the French flag was flying over Frankfurt and Darmstadt. 4 hours later, Homburg, Hanau, Dieburg, and the adjacent territory was occupied. The inhabitants were amazed, but there was no opposition, and before the day was over, the French were firmly established. French soldiers, assisted by civilian volunteers, regulating traffic and keeping crowds from assembling. The first thing the French did on occupying Frankfurt was to take in custody the members of the local police, who it was thought might obstruct the work of the French administration. Later on, the services of some citizens were utilized. Apart from a regrettable demonstration by students, there has been little disorder. That the terms of the armistice have not wholly deprived the Germans of heavy artillery is shown by this picture of Ebert troops with a train of armored cars guarding the suburbs of Berlin against attack during the period when the Kapp troops held the main city. A new kind of traffic policeman in Berlin streets that it is to be hoped will not become popular in other capitals. A soldier is stationed with a machine gun in an improvised trench in a street in the northern section of the city. The scene occurred at the time that a rebel uprising was threatened, and represented a precautionary measure on the part of the authorities. Detachment of the French occupying troops passing through one of the main avenues of Darmstadt, one of the German cities that, in conjunction with Frankfurt, was taken possession of by the French on April 6th. How long the occupation will last is conjectural. The French government has announced that the troops will be withdrawn as soon as the German forces have been recalled from the Ruhr district. Headquarters of the French occupying forces at the Hotel Imperial at Frankfurt. The city is now submissive to the new regime. Bloodshed occurred shortly after the occupation, owing to a demonstration chiefly due to students that took place when a rumor spread that the French had been recalled. Jeers and threats provoked a volley that resulted in the death and wounding of several Germans. Solemn presentation of banners to the famous Italian brigade, Cuneo, which by its deeds of valor on the Carso won the name of the Ever Faithful. The ceremony took place at Milan and was an occasion of note. General Badoglio, chief of the general staff, and other distinguished generals are here seen reviewing the brigade. Decorated monument of Victor Emmanuel II at Milan, Italy, surrounded by an enormous crowd at the celebration of the 100th anniversary of his birth. Group of Chinese children attending the public schools of San Francisco. Apart from the facial characteristics, they might be mistaken for those of any other nationality. Their parents represent all types, from the immigrant coolie from Canton to the suave and accomplished merchant from Shanghai or Hong Kong who has his business establishment in America. The children are said to be apt students and eager for learning. In China itself, the scholar is honored and ranks high in popular esteem. This placard was found in a chop suey place in Chinatown, San Francisco, and expresses the celestial view of prohibition. The spelling and syntax are open to criticism, but the screed is not devoid of oriental attempts at humor. Interesting little ones of Chinese parents residing in San Francisco. Whatever feeling the people of the coast have for social or economic reasons against the Chinese immigrants, no further danger is to be apprehended from their offspring, who are being subjected to American influence and being taught in American public schools. There are no obstacles placed in the way of their education here, and the schools in which they are taught have excellent staff of teachers and all modern educational appliances. Leaders of outlaw railroad strike arrested in Chicago. Deputy U.S. Marshal C.C. Smith is reading the warrants issued for the arrest of H.E. Reading, chairman of the United Engineers Association, Center, and John Grunow, Right, organizer of Yardmen's strike. Royal Maundy money being arranged and made ready for distribution to the poor in Westminster Abbey, London. The name is given to small silver coins specially struck for the purpose, that are given to recipients from London parishes on Maundy Thursday, just preceding Easter. The custom is a very ancient one. The money is supposed to be the gift of the sovereign. Concrete houses made after a plan that originated with Thomas A. Edison, erected in a New Jersey town. Each is made for a single family, and it is said that 3,000 will shortly be erected in Brooklyn. Making one of the concrete monolithic houses. The material is poured into a form that can be used many times and left to harden. Close view of one of the completed concrete houses. The plans call for 6 rooms and bath. They are claimed to be cooler in summer and warmer in winter than houses built of other material. They are detached and stand on plots 25 by 100. Interior of part of room in concrete house. The houses contain a modern laundry with washing machine and modern heating plant. Plumbing and fixtures are of highest grade. Mixing the concrete used in the construction of the houses. The houses are manufactured rather than built. They are fireproof in construction and can be made with great rapidity. Houses with 6 rooms and bath are sold for $5,500 each. Representative Champ Clark of Missouri speaking in the House of Representatives, over which at one time he presided. He is discussing the Porter Peace Resolution and maintaining that Congress had no authority to pass it, as the concluding of peace was the prerogative of the president. The resolution was adopted by 242 to 150. Members of the Wilson cabinet leaving the White House after having had a conference with President Wilson, the first cabinet meeting that had been held for a long time. The president himself presided, and the chief subjects discussed were the outlaw strike and the differences between the Department of Justice and Department of Labor. Beautiful yacht Electra, the property of Guglielmo Marconi, the famous wireless inventor, leaving the harbor of Southampton, England. Marconi has lately come into the news in connection with the possibility of the Earth being brought into communication with Mars. He asserted that there had recently been disturbances at wireless stations that were unprecedented and could not be accounted for on any principle known to wireless photography. It was conjectured that the inhabitants of Mars might be making efforts to get in touch with us.